Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. It's nice to see some familiar faces. We'll give folks a couple of minutes to join before we get started. I'm trying out this display of having both me and the PowerPoint, and it's extremely weird to see me this way. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay, wonderful. Amazing. So we'll probably give people just 2 minutes. I know it's lunchtime, so people usually will quickly go, well, it's lunchtime in my time zone. So some people might be grabbing some lunch and then sitting back down. So we'll just I hope everyone is doing well. I don't know what the weather looked like where you are, but in Montreal this week, it was a lot of snow, sadly. So I hope we get spring days very soon. Wonderful. So I'm slowly going to get started. I have a few introductory remarks before we jump into the meat of the discussion. So it'll give some time for other folks to join. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandrine Desforges. I use she, her pronouns. I am a research associate at Higher Education Strategy Associates. I know a lot of people on the call because we've had a chance to see each other at AI-CADEMY. But I'm also aware that not everyone here was at the summit. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware of who's talking to whom. Some of my colleagues might also be joining the chat and the Zoom, but just to kind of listen in, know what stuck and resonated with folks throughout the conference. So don't be surprised if you see some other familiar faces from HESA as well. And without further ado, let's just, yes, wonderful. I would love if people could introduce themselves in the chat, share with us what organization, what role, where you're joining us from. This is really meant to be a super interactive roundtable, a discussion. If you've attended previous roundtables, sometimes they were a bit more listening from experts, but this one is really meant to be hands-on discussion. So if people would be comfortable opening their cameras, and also mostly once you're invited to open your microphones and share, that would be wonderful, because it's truly what's going to make this session interesting and useful for everyone. So quickly, the goal of today's roundtable is to provide a space for everyone in the sector to reunite, to gather after approximately a month after the summit, to continue the reflections on what did you bring back from the conference? What are maybe new questions that emerged? Were there any barriers that you faced after trying to implement some of these things that you learned within your institutions? So trying to basically provide a space to digest everything that we heard, because we know that it was a lot of content. It was really jam-packed for 2 days. So that's the goal of today, which means that I also, unfortunately, was not the summation of the 100 speakers and presenters that were there. So if you have super specific questions about, the content that was shared by some speakers and presenters, I can try to redirect you to these people, but I will not necessarily be able to, re-give their presentation. Of course, that's not the goal of today. As I said, it is going to be a super interactive session. So we have approximately 90 minutes together. We'll start by having a larger group discussion, kind of to break the ice, to also remind some people of the discussions that happened. But as I said, not everyone here attended the summit. And when we looked at the numbers from people that registered on the Zoom link, I don't know how many people of those showed up, but it was approximately 50% of registrants that had not attended the summit and 50% that had attended. So this first section is really to be able to kind of bring everyone up to speed a little bit about what was discussed, and also make sure people are getting comfortable again interacting in those sessions. The second part, which will probably be the largest one, is going to be in breakout groups. So the breakout group will be a deep dive into specific questions. Each group will tackle a different question for approximately 25 minutes. You'll have the time to exchange in smaller groups, and then we'll bring everyone back and everyone will share a summary of what happened in their group. So super important. I encourage everyone to stay until the very end, because you will be able to hear about what was discussed on different questions from other peers. And then once we finish the large group debrief, we still have some time booked, set apart if people want to touch on other subjects, have other questions, other elements that they want to discuss. Before going into this, I just want to remind everyone that this session is recorded because all of our AI roundtables, we want to make sure that they're open to everyone in the sector to benefit from the learning, even if they were not able to attend live. So these are made available on our website. However, breakout rooms are not recorded. So feel comfortable sharing potentially more details in the breakout rooms compared to sharing in the larger group if there's anything you don't want to be attributed to you. And I also want to mention that, of course, this is an AI roundtable, so we are making good use of Zoom AI Companion. So there will be a summary of the meeting that is noted down by AI, in addition to me taking notes and you taking notes during the breakout rooms. And there will be an executive summary shared a couple of days after the session as well. Okay, wonderful. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat. That is great. And again, it's really nice to see some familiar faces, but also some new faces today. So the first thing I want everyone to do is grab your phones and go on the QR code that is right here, which is a Menti link. I am also going to put the link directly in the chat if that's easier. And basically, again, this is kind of more of an icebreaker. I'm going to be asking folks to share either one or two learnings or takeaways from AI-CADEMY. Again, this is just kind of to get back into the headspace of the summit and to bring everyone else to speed. So I invite people to go on the QR code or use a link in the chat. I will quickly switch screen, but the QR code will also be available on the new screen. I'm just going to go on the Menti to see people's responses. Voila. So again, sharing one learning or takeaway, you can also share more than one. It's possible to submit multiple different answers. Something that you didn't know prior to the conference or that really resonated with you, really stuck out. So yes, a lot of eagerness to explore and innovate with AI. I think that's something that all of our team really felt, that people were extremely enthusiastic throughout the discussions. It was a very vibrant space. Yes, problem solving to problem formulation. That's super interesting. AI is transforming education into a more personalized, inclusive, and human-centered. Wonderful. I can move these so everyone can see. So yes, a lot of different and unique realities, but with similar challenges faced across the board. A lot of care and thought by institutions, definitely. I think it's important to recognize that people are investing a lot of time, a lot of energy into trying to build a thoughtful response to that. There's a spectrum of responses, definitely. I'm going to use the Menti AI functionality, and we'll group some of the responses right here. If this works well, right here. Okay. So institutional approaches. There's a lot of similarities. Okay, wonderful. A lot of desire to collaborate. I think that's one of the goals today. Really remarkable. Yeah, the care that I just mentioned as well. The tech is developing really fast, which is hard to keep up within institutions for sure. That one was really at the core of a lot of discussions, which is to face the AI-powered workforce or education era. How do we need to readjust to what skills we're training our students and staff to have? Wonderful. So I will leave this up so people can continue looking at this, but I want to ask a different question to everyone to interact. But this time, please open your mics. You can raise your hands to share with everyone, or you can also put in the chat if you prefer. I would love to hear, was there any concrete element, concrete action or step that you brought back and that you implemented or encourage your institution to implement following AI Academy? And if you did, what was it? And what was the response? Was it welcomed? Was there any barriers that you faced, any challenges? And it can be something very small, very practical, concrete. Maybe just, oh, I spent some time, playing with this new tool. But I would love to hear folks share. So I'm going to give a couple of seconds and you can raise your hands to share with people. Yes, Partha.
And thank you, Sandrine. So myself, Partha Roy from NATE, Alberta. So yeah, I think fantastic. I was able to attend the 2 days event that was there in Calgary, and I did summarize a lot of the learnings using again AI, and I was able to present some of those findings with our team members within our institution who couldn't make it there. But yeah, I think it was very well received. Some of the key points that stood out was more around, I think, some of the discussions that AI policies, which people find it to be lengthy and often not understood very well. Instead, how we draft policies that are more that is more digestible and at the same time focus more on the AI literacy piece. I think that was very well received by our team members. Few other things, I think there was some widespread discussions around use of AI, the cultural nuances that was shared. And then I think some of the sessions that I attended was focusing more on the large language models and the biases that comes with it and how you mitigate some of those risks. So those were fantastic. And I think as a concrete action point, I am using it more in my research to learn and create some efficiencies. And we have a couple of other use cases going on as well in program curriculum development side as well.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. And I'm really glad to hear that there was like a debrief session with people that couldn't attend at NATE. That's amazing. And it's a really good point you're raising about sometimes, and especially because AI can be a very, tech-y kind of language. And those policies and guidance developed by institutions, as useful as they are, can sometimes be a bit overwhelming for people to navigate. So yeah, important to keep everything very digestible. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else wants to share any practical element that he did following the conference? I'm seeing in a question in the chat, which is, could someone please talk about the top center comment, transforming education, etc., and saying that their own experience has been the opposite. So I think this person is referring to AI is transforming education to a more personalized, inclusive, and human-centered experience, shifting the focus from rigid systems and policies to adaptive learning. So without wanting to put anyone on the spot, either the person that shared that or anyone else that feels similarly would maybe want to elaborate a little. I can maybe give some preliminary thoughts to that, which is that, oh, yes, Kathleen, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Salvin. Happy to sort of intervene and share what I had taken away from the conference and perhaps what this comment also had captured. I remember some framing that we've been very focused on what can go wrong instead of what can go right with AI. And I think even from the exhibitors, vendors who were there, there are products who can really support learning for individuals um, uh, who need assistance in a way of maybe we think of mentorship, but mentorship by human requires a sort of availability and accessibility that is a little more rigid, typically a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Whereas the AI tools integrate into textbooks or otherwise that assist in different type of assignments can really be available on demand when the student is trying to make sense of a text, trying to make sense of uh, answering a quiz and getting correct answers and whatnot. So I thought that there was really what seems to be very useful tools for students who require that assistance, and it need not be limited by the capacity of individual instructors, TAs, et cetera, and the limitations on time capacity. So that's how I one took takeaway, and perhaps how I see a little bit of that comment.
No, for sure. I think that's definitely related. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. So I hope that that gives a bit of guidance to the question in the chat. And I see another question about in the chat about strategies and tips to develop institutional policies and guidance. I think this might be very well discussed within the breakouts, within the questions that I've built for the breakouts. So I'm going to just hold off on that for a second, but we can also bring it back within the larger group debrief at the end if ever it's not touched enough. Anyone else want to share maybe a concrete element that they brought back to their institution, or if you didn't, if there's something that you wish you would have brought back but didn't because maybe lack of time capacity, the lack of openness from the institution, because that's also a big part of how can we make sure knowledge translation following events is a bit more efficient. Karine, yes, go ahead.
Sandrine, maybe because I'm a little bit warmed up, but also because I appreciate how difficult it is to get a crowd going on Zoom. I did come, my name is Karine Morin. I'm president of the Federation for Humanities and Social Sciences. And those who may be a little bit familiar with the Federation know that our members include scholarly associations, but also institutions. And so I've been struck how a lot of institutions seem to be doing this sort of their own leadership. And I'm surprised that there isn't yet, it doesn't seem enough cross provinces or even nationally that there isn't more support to advance this work and guidance to advance this work. So I was keen to attend to hear perhaps of such a need. I'm not sure that it was necessarily articulated directly as such, but I think I'm still bringing back to my organization, to the Federation for Humanities and Social Sciences, that sort of sense of how can we support our members directly or the broader community. When we speak of a community of 90,000 trainees and faculty in humanities social sciences, that is a lot of people who need those skills to continue in the workforce, including in higher ed as instructors, but that can also really shape how we deploy these tools. So many opportunities that I took away that I'm trying to maybe explore a little bit with some experts and otherwise with the membership in different manners. And then finally, I'll say, yes, a small secretariat of 20 or so staff. If we could find some efficiencies in note taking of meetings, for instance, and even those quick sort of summaries that you've just demonstrated, Sandrine, I think these are tools that we could benefit from. So we're accelerating this. Let's explore and see what tools we can take up. We're accelerating that timeline a little bit to try and gain some efficiencies in some of our work. So those were motivating. The conference certainly motivated me to advance on those two fronts, external and internal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's great to hear that it provided some, inspiration and motivation. I think that was the main goal. And now that people are a little warmed up, maybe, we are going to go into the actual core of the discussion, which will require people to actually open their mics and share. You will be in breakout rooms, though, so it might be a little less intimidating. I will bring back to my main PowerPoint right here. So how we're going to work for the, so that was what we just did. How we're going to work for the breakouts. We are approximately 40 people in the chat. So I'm going to create groups of approximately 6 or 7 people. And each group will be tackling a different question. So there are 5 questions on the screen. I'll go through them quickly just to make sure that they're clear for when you are in your groups. But then you will be focusing on that question for approximately 25 minutes, trying to identify as actionable items as possible, or just elements that need to be considered. and then we'll be reporting back. So the first question is, and these questions were all built following the takeaways and questions that were shared throughout the conference, and also the summaries that we've read post-event that people have shared. So a lot of people, I think the core of a lot of discussions throughout AI-CADEMY was how this transformation of education is actually leading us to need to reevaluate the value proposition of post-secondary education. And a lot of people were like, okay, this is good, but what should be our anchor, our main pillars when we do those reflections? So I'd love the first group to talk about what values and mission should be at the core of post-secondary education in 5 or 10 years. And now that you have identified those as a group, how would that change concretely how we approach strategic planning, resource allocation, and curriculum development? First group. Second is about that piece of collaboration that Karin just mentioned, and that was also in other responses online. So we often talk about the need to collaborate, to build relationships, to bring voices to the table. What should that look like? Who do you think we need to collaborate with? When I say we, I mean the institutions. What processes are needed to ensure meaningful collaboration? Third question. While AI presents opportunities for accessibility and equity, we just talked about personalized learning, for instance, it can also exacerbate inequities. We talked about biases in the first intervention, and also increase digital divides. So what processes do you think institutions need to put in place to reduce potential harm and contribute to the greater good instead? The fourth one is a bit of a very topical one. So we all know the financial scarcity of Canadian post-secondary education, which poses both a threat to AI because we lack capacity to focus on dedicating a resource to do that, but also an opportunity because AI might be useful to increase efficiencies. But that might also lead to some people fearing to be replaced by AI. It's a very common fear. So what concrete strategies do you think PSIs could implement to mitigate the risks and maximize benefits? What are concrete applications of AI tools that could contribute to reduce the costs without replacing the human? And then the last question will be, one of the main takeaways was about the role of dialogue and interactions in play in learning. So how can we use AI as to foster this dialogue instead of siloing learning? Okay, so for these questions will be on the document, but I again invite everyone to open a different document, which is a Google Doc where everyone can be taking their notes. The reason why this is there is so that we're able to share the notes taken in different groups afterwards with everyone. So I'll put the link in the chat again. And the first task that you will all have to do when you join the group is, well, first to introduce each other. And afterwards, the dreaded task of determining one note taker. And I know, I told myself that I should preemptively reach out to people, but you know how time is. So just find a couple of seconds to determine a note taker, and then you can get ahead and talk about the questions. So you will be sent in breakout groups for 25 minutes. I will send reminders of when time is running out. And please, on the note-taking document, just go on the page that is associated with the number of the breakout room you're attributed to. So just give me 2 seconds to create those rooms. Hi, folks. I see lots of open cameras, so I'm assuming that means lots of interactions, which is good. Hello again, everyone. I hope this was fruitful. From what I'm seeing in the document, lots of notes, so that's great. I hope this was engaging and that people could all interact. I think most people are back within the main room. So what I would like for us to do now is, of course, you all talked about different questions, except I know one group straight away went back to a different question, which is totally fine. But so I would like maybe for everyone to be able to share some of the main takeaways from the discussions with everyone else so that everyone can benefit from what was shared. Of course, everyone will have access to the cleaned up document as well at the end. But maybe for the first question, which was about the value proposition of post-secondary education and what values and missions should be at the core of that, and how would that change strategic planning, resource allocation, and curriculum development? Would anyone from the first group want to share some of the main learnings, elements that they discussed, what resonated?
Yeah, I've been voluntold, Sandrine, so I'll try and summarize it, and my wonderful colleagues can jump in if I miss anything or mess it up. Uh, we actually had quite a good conversation around what the purpose of post-secondary education is. And I mean, part of what we came to was that the value proposition doesn't change necessarily all that much in this new world with AI all around us, but it actually probably means we have to live up to what that proposition was. So we talk a lot about creating students, developing critical thinking skills in students, preparing them for for environments where it's uncertain. We talk about giving them transferable skills, but actually we're going to have to make sure that those things happen. And people in the industry find that students are not necessarily well prepared for that when they come into them. So we talked about that for quite a bit, and thinking about moving away even more so from content, loading content into heads, to development of skills and transferable skills, particularly across industries. The other thing was making connection to industry is going to be so critical, because higher education, post-secondary education is still a long way behind where industry is right now. We've kind of been left in the dust a little bit, and it does take a long time for us to catch up with curriculum anyway. But the only way we're really going to have a good sense of what's needed is to actually engage with industry, to make the necessary changes that we have to over the next little while. We have to figure out how to do that quickly, and AI can be a help for that. Some of the things that take a lot of time and drudgery are our quality assurance processes, that designing new course programs, updating those things, changing our learning outcomes. It's really good at helping you to ideate some of those things, not automate, but ideate. Think about how you can see things differently. Think about it as a collaborator and co-creator. I think that's probably a summary. Anyone else in my team? Things that I missed?
I see some ants clapping, so I think people found that pretty accurate. It was super clear for someone that was not in the breakout room. So that's great. Thank you so much, Nick, for being voluntold but accepting the role. Very appreciated. I know another group kind of diverged and went also to talk about the first question. So would anyone in that group 5, want to also share what was talked about that first question?
I can speak to it because I'm the diversion. I was away attending to something at work, and I was like, wait, what question are we talking about? And then here we are talking about AI competency frameworks and the overall future. So if anybody wants a little bit of extra for number 1, you can go to breakout room 5. And I popped in a few of the shared URLs. So the competency framework for academic librarians. So I myself am a librarian. So that's a draft framework that the ALA has written that I've been looking at to see. So one of the things I've been doing is embedding different types of AI literacy instruction and looking how that's going to look within the competencies for our students as well. So I was really fascinated by question 1. What is this going to look like with the vision and mission? And then Simon, who was in our group, shared the UBC's competencies as well framework that they made for faculty, staff, and students that can be turned into a training program and learning outcomes. So I popped that in there as well. And another discussion that came out of this kind of look to the future is that idea of, somebody else, I didn't write this down, but somebody else said it very well. And it was, and supporting students in learning how to utilize AI in a way that, doesn't necessarily harm their learning, but supports their competencies and abilities to use it more like an assistant rather than a crutch. So that was that.
Wonderful. Does anyone, either part of these groups, want to add any other elements, or part of the other groups have questions, similar thoughts, anything they want to bounce off of before we move to the second question? Darren.
The question about the purpose of higher education institutions, I think, is a really important one, and even beyond just the AI question, I think, given the environment that we find ourselves in right now, the budget constraints, the reduced enrollments because of the international student cutbacks. I think the speed at which things are changing, and some of the things that we're hearing from industry as well about, the value of some of the longer credentials, the 4-year degree programs for undergrads, for example. It's time for us to really apply a lot of creativity to what we're doing and to think about what the purpose of higher education is and post-secondary education as a whole. And is that changing as a result of AI, or is it just all these other factors that are all kind of happening at the same time? We seem to be at a bit of a convergence point or an inflection point where we need to start thinking a little bit more strategically and in a much more targeted way about what are we actually trying to do, and do the old purposes still apply, or do we have a new purpose?
Yeah, these are all very good questions. And I like your point about, is it actually AI changing that, or just the whole context that's leading to those changes? And that's something that was also talked during the conference. Maybe before moving to the second question, you talked about creativity and us needing to maybe think about the way we do things differently. Do you, or does anyone else here have some ideas of what creativity or creative programming might look like for post-secondary education?
Was that a question for the second group, or just a broader question overall?
Anyone who wants to jump in, but if you do have an idea, I did see someone in the chat. Can you rephrase the question? For sure. So one of the things Darren was talking about is that we might need to be a bit more creative in the ways that we offer what post-secondary education has to offer to better meet the needs of current students, learners in the current system, if I'm understanding that right. So I'm asking the group, what does creative programming in post-secondary education looks like?
One thing that I've been hearing a lot about is, and some schools have already started to implement this, is stacked credentials. So you start off in a 1-year certificate program, for example, and then you move into, if you complete that and you want to continue, you move into like a 2-year or 3-year diploma, and then maybe a 4-year degree if that is within your aptitude or within sort of what field you are studying asks of you, because there's a lot of students who are kind of getting through and maybe they just kind of tap out after 2 or 3 years. And under the current model, especially in universities with the 4-year degrees, if you tap out after 3 years, you get nothing. Whereas with a stacked credential program, like even if you complete 1 year, you get a certificate. If you complete 2 years or 3 years, you get a diploma or an advanced diploma. So you at least come out with something. And I think the idea of being able to structure programs to accommodate different learners' needs and different industry needs as well with what people are going to be doing when they graduate. Not everybody needs a 4-year degree. So a lot of people can get by with smaller credentials, and we can be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more versatile, and allow people to transfer between institutions or between programs in a little bit more of a flexible way. We've just been sort of in this 4-year box, I think, for a really long time. And even the colleges kind of got seduced by this idea of like being able to offer degrees. Degrees were kind of the credential that everybody wanted and needed, and was what we were told was of value. And that's changing. And it's the employers that are telling us that. And so now we're having to rethink that. And I think this is a huge, huge opportunity to rethink what the purpose of higher education is and how we can go about transforming it.
Yeah, I love that. That's super helpful. And I see, Panos, you have your hand raised. Do you want to respond to that or another comment?
Yeah, I want to build on top of that. I was as Darren was speaking, I was thinking that yes, on one hand it seems like the 4-year model has like kind of like not diminish essentially, but be more modular, I guess, with stacked things. But also, and it might give off the impression that we don't need so long education anymore. But actually, it's even more than ever. We need to never stop learning. Like that lifelong learning we've been hearing for like really now it's like it's the way to go. I mean, it's you have now to learn about AI. I mean, all of us, how to use this, how to. I mean, it's so I only think that's gonna be like instead of like not only a 4 year thing that it's now becoming 1 or 2. It's going on for perpetuity almost. Like you continuously take things and you continuously learn. Um, but of course, yes, our institutions are not made for that. They're based out of the industrial model. One of the things that I had the chance to like to talk about because I was unfortunately had to go step away for a bit. In terms of we talk about how faculty are thinking like, oh, it's the end of the world. But it's like we're making the assumption that the previous model, pre-AI, was like, oh, amazing. And if it only wasn't for AI, I mean, it's ruining everything. And it wasn't amazing. It was like multiple reports saying how it's failing students left and right and all of that thing. So yeah, no grief for that. Sorry.
No, I love that. And I saw a lot of heads in approval. So Saha.
Thanks. So I actually am really passionate about the value of creativity as a competency right now in society. I think we all need it. It means the capacity to develop new neural pathways and ways of imagining things that we haven't had before. So I think creativity in that sense, there's like that bigger domain of it. But within the education system, I would say something that might be beneficial is just I've heard a lot about connecting to industry. So it's questioning the value and the purpose of that program, for example. So if it's a $40,000 investment, especially in this economy, like you have to really think about what we're promising the value of education is in this time for those like young people. So for me, I think that I love working. I work currently for a private career college. And before I joined this organization, I was like, I don't want to work for a private career college. But one of the greatest values that I got from it was that you're tying your outcomes specifically to the job. So there is a connection of curriculum to the real world place. And adult learners really love and value that because they want to know that what they're learning is going to be useful, especially if the knowledge industry, the shelf life of knowledge, before we used to say shelf life of knowledge is shorter and shorter. And now we can say, well, the accessibility of knowledge is faster and faster. So how do we kind of find ourselves in that position in that sense? And so creativity, I think, is a skill that needs to be practiced by educators and students. And I think it's a way of even thinking about thinking, like that metacognition process, the ability to reiterate an idea over and over again. Sometimes we get so stuck with like a perspective of a point of view, like whether it's in humanities or social sciences. And part of the biggest skill that I think some instructors teach is, can you open your mind to think of multiple possibilities at once? So I think from a creativity perspective, it's not so much prescriptive, but I think it's a competency that we need to preach and see the value of at this time for our ability to evolve at such a rapid pace, to create new things, to create new solutions that now could be done way faster than before as leverage. So those are some of my thoughts around that.
No, I love that. Wonderful. Thank you everyone for sharing. And I do see the time advancing quickly. So let's talk about Breakout Room 2, which was in charge of collaborations and partnership and relationship building. Anyone wants to share kind of the main takeaways from that discussion?
Okay, I'm looking at my team members, but please feel free to jump in. I think, yeah, we had this exciting collaboration and partnership one to think about. But our conversation started with budget and resource constraints. So that was one of the primary pinpoints that all of us shared. And I think then we talked quite a bit about particularly the educational quality and assurance piece. That, yeah, whether and if AI is fundamentally an educational issue and where we need to focus on. I think some of the observations that we collected was competence demonstration more from a face-to-face or classroom setting, verification and quality assurance. And I think how Gen AI integrates across K-12 and PSI ecosystems. So those are some of the themes that But then we had another, while looking at collaboration opportunities, we talked about how accessible AI policies and then industry aligned program development. So that was one of the key themes that came out. I think some of our team members focused on inclusion, accessibility, and cultural representation to be a priority. And we also uh, reflected on some of the learnings from the conference itself, where some of the presenters from outside Canada talked about native language, large language models from Sweden, Singapore, and Africa. And then we have worked for HESA. Looks like need for a pan-Canadian sort of leadership and bringing all the parties together. So who would be best suited to kind of lead some of these initiatives? And then, yeah, stakeholders to engage. We talked about industry partners, students, of course, K-12 and PSIs, community groups, Pan-Canadian Network. And I think also talked about support for open education resources for faculty, stakeholders, and various stakeholders. That's what I summed up. If I'm missing anything, please feel free to jump in.
That's wonderful. That seems super complete. Before asking if anyone else has any comments, duly noted for the note about ESSA's role. And without saying anything, I can just say that we're in a deep dive internal discussions about what that can look like for the future of our role in AI. So stay tuned. But yeah, anyone wants to react, share additional thoughts about collaboration, partnership building? No worries to people that need to head out, by the way. Okay, maybe we can go to breakout 3 then. So breakout room 3 was about accessibility and equity, and also digital divides and perpetuation of inequities. So anyone from group 3 wants to jump in?
I can get started. We had some really, really good discussions. We talked a lot about the digital divide, about the inequities, and the fact that schools are providing some tools, sometimes through Microsoft, like Office 365 subscriptions. They sometimes offer Copilot as an add-on and makes that available to students. But some students have the subscription options. Some students have access to the free options. So there is going to be huge inequity. But one of the things that we talked about, and Karine brought this up in the context of the librarians, is that we've had this issue before. Almost every technology that's ever been introduced, there's inequity at the beginning for people who have access and who don't have access. And even with books, there's only certain number of physical copies available, and in the early days of literacy, not everybody could read them. So even just that baseline level of literacy was an access point. And so that's kind of where we kind of dove into it a little bit more deeply, was around this idea of having digital literacy. And hopefully some of that is coming through in the secondary school system, where they're starting to get a little bit more digitally literate and AI literate. But we kind of need to help our students along and kind of make sure that in those first formative years of post-secondary that they're getting that baseline digital literacy and AI literacy, so they can understand what the capabilities are. What does proper AI usage look like? What does intellectual property look like in the world of AI? What's responsible AI? What's sustainable AI? And making sure that they understand that full scope, because there's a lot of gray areas as well, like students getting improperly dinged for intellectual property infringements because they used Grammarly to help them with their writing, and international students using tools like Grammarly or other translation tools to help them with their writing, and it's getting flagged as being AI driven. Well, what's the responsibility of faculty and administrators from an AI literacy perspective as well? So lots of complex interconnected issues around access and equity, and making sure that everyone kind of has that same understanding of what these tools are, how we can use them, and how they can be deployed in a responsible way.
That's amazing. I have maybe a follow-up question, not only for you, Darren, but for everyone. When speaking directly with some institutions that are trying to build their literacy kind of framework within students, some people have mentioned facing the issue of academic freedom and not being able to clearly dictate what instructors should be training their students about and with what tools and what means. And of course, we know that not everyone has the same level as faculty members of comfort or enthusiasm about using these tools. Has anyone found a solution or an approach to maybe how kind of mitigate that divide even between classes and individuals having different instructors? I don't think there's a miracle solution here, but just trying to see if people have some thoughts.
Gosh, because I teach.
Oh, go ahead.
So I teach in creative disciplines, and wow, is there a huge range of opinions and feelings about AI in the creative industry. I've had faculty who are like absolutely adamant that they see it as literally like the devil incarnate. Um, other faculty talking about like the intellectual property issues, the copyright and trademark infringements. Even it came up in the news this week about ChatGPT's new Studio Ghibli inspired image generators and like what that's doing to the animation industry, for example. It's like so this is where the literacy issue comes into play. Like we're not going to be able to hide from it. Every new technology has been a disruptor. It's been a force multiplier. It's been a thing that's unlocked like new ideas and new ways of thinking. And it's scary, and change is scary. And I think we're doing ourselves and our students and our institutions a disservice by trying to hide from it. We need to like try to get out in front of it as much as we can and try to get people on board and also be cognizant about using these things responsibly. And not just kind of like going to make myself look like an action figure because I can. Because like how much energy did that consume to do that? And guilty as charged, I did that this morning. But it's about like how do we engage with these tools in a responsible way?
No, for sure. Thank you, Darren. Melissa?
For me, one of the colleges that I worked with on this issue, I think it comes down to clarity on what constitutes academic integrity and cheating. And so, for instance, Darren talked about Grammarly. Is that cheating or not cheating? And so I think one of the issues that we maybe have to think about before we really understand academic freedom or as it relates to AI is let's solve the issue around what is proper citation, what is proper use of, and then that will provide, I think, a little more grounding for people to work around that and know and understand, without infringing on academic freedom. And I think if we can come to some sort of baseline understanding of when it's okay and not okay to use these tools, I think that will alleviate some of the anxiety when it comes to the use of AI.
Yeah, very true. A lot of this pushback comes from anxiety and lack of knowledge and fear of being replaced in all those elements, for sure. I also saw a comment by Amanda in the chat. There are general undergraduate degree level expectations and graduate degree level expectations that span across Canada. If the quality assurance agencies banded together, an additional expectation could be added for Gen AI literacy. This would ensure that it's built into the curriculum because QA bodies evaluate PSIs on this. Definitely. That goes back to kind of a more national or provincial common approach. But yeah, very true. Okay, what about group 4? So breakout room 4 was about the financial scarcity and how to maybe use it to increase efficiency without replacing the human. So big questions. Anyone wants to start tackling this? Loretta?
So I'll talk for our group. There's quite a few notes there. We sort of started with what we felt was low-hanging fruit, which are things like chatbots and some of these resources that are being used. However, there were definitely challenges with accuracy and how and continues to be an issue of things like data governance, right? So if we're using these chatbots for things, how much information are they getting and from where? And what's the expectation on the user? You know, there are a lot of students who come into chatbots and say, hey, can you tell me if I have prerequisites for something, as an example? But it can only do that if it can access the student record. And of course, we know that that's not going to happen. And so there's a lot of issues around just data governance and the headspace required to be thinking about how to make these tools efficient. Are we creating any efficiencies at all, frankly? And that kind of led into other perhaps more useful ways and concrete ways that this kind of information could be used. An example was given as something as simple as could a software be able to anticipate the needs of a printer and do reordering because ink levels were low, and there could be some real efficiencies created on these very kind of obvious yes and no answers, and those kinds of things could be anticipated and used, using predictive modeling for classroom scheduling, for food services, residents, those kinds of things. We could see value in it. And the real value is in task automation. So how can we make things more user-friendly for the inputs? So, you know, we're complicated places and students don't necessarily understand who's responsible for what things. Faculty and staff aren't necessarily aware of who's responsible for what things. So can we bring that kind of triaging into the process? Come here, ask a question, and can we get the question to the right places? Specifically, that would help with error reduction, maintaining single sources of truth, being able to provide data to the right places with the right times versus multiple versions of things created for different teams. So that's where we were kind of thinking it could be useful. And I think the biggest takeaway is in that last point about being able to reduce transactional tasks, but not whole jobs. We don't think people are going to be replaced or that it's useful, but the investment of time that's needed to make sure these processes work well. Once that investment is done, we take things off of the mental load of staff. So how can we automate and do some of these things? We're all talking about how there's too much on our plates. There's too many things, tasks we need to think about, where they have to go and who has to do them. Could we reduce some of that mental load so that staff can be doing the human part of their job and the interactions as part of their job? So that's, you know, our conversation was kind of all over the place, but it was really about identifying where the real value is, and how that can increase morale and job satisfaction and student satisfaction, in creating reducing some of the barriers that some of us face in trying to navigate our institutions. That was where we came from.
Oh, that sounds great. And I also see a lot of heads nodding. Does anyone want to react to that?
You guys covered a lot of ground. And that was great. I wasn't expecting there to be like operational efficiencies covered in this chat. But you're right. And like the data governance piece, like, wow. That was something I brought up with I think our VP of IT last year, or my associate dean. We were talking about like how like implementing ChatGPT or some of the other generative AI tools, and like can we sandbox it to within our institutions so that we don't have student work like going out and being used to teach the next generation of large language models? How do we sort of constrain that? But you know, there's I think huge opportunities for capturing some of the institutional knowledge that is kind of, I mean, again, this gets into some scary territory with like people being replaced by machines, but there's some people whose value is their institutional knowledge, people who've been there for a really long time and who know like where to find the most recent version of such and such a document. And if anybody else goes onto the intranet, you enter it into the search engine, you get 10,000 versions of the same document and you can't find the right one, but there's somebody who knows. And that person is worth so much. But could they be doing work that's of even more value instead of just being kind of the human repository of knowledge? Are there ways to use Gen AI for that kind of stuff? But yeah, that was really great. You guys, I love the arc that you took, and I was like, yes, 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 and yes.
I agreed. It was a great narrative. And I just want to say that like the whole summaries from breakouts has been super, super insightful. I saw a lot of heads and people reacting, so that's good. I know breakout room 5 already contributed to the first topic. Was there anything else that your group talked about the initial question, which was about interactions and the role of interactions and play and dialogue in learning. Perfect. I saw in the notes that there was one point about how can you use the tool as someone to interact with and kind of bounce off ideas and debate, and rather than just, having it give you an answer to you. So that's good. I also see a lot of great comments in the chat, and I want to reiterate that all the discussions, the notes from the document, the Mentimeter earlier, and also the AI companion notes will be kind of cleaned up and shared with you in a couple of days, maybe a week or so. But before we conclude, is there anything else that people want to react to, share? Yes, go ahead, Panos.
I really want to commend like the one of the things that I took from the AI-CADEMY, conference there was like the approach from Arizona State University and their openness to experimentation. I think that's really bold. At the time where we're thinking about, and it's not only about colleges and universities, by the way. I've been talking to like people from large organizations, right? And they're battling with what some authors in the space call like stupid AI policies. Like, oh, you can only use Copilot. Okay, well, what's everything else on my phone, because it just does the job. And this is going to hit everybody very, very hard. It's already happening with students because they're ignoring all of this, of course. Faculty are doing the same. This technology it's kind of like universal. And the fact that, it seems like Arizona State University had the funds, of course, the resources, all of that. But it seems like the bold vision to embrace this and say, like, we're here for you, experiment, and whatever we want, we're going to make it happen. But there was no question that, you're creating, and there's the creativity part, the future of education. Play along. While everybody else is trying to like de-risk it as much as possible, right? And I know why. I'm not saying I understand why. I'm just worried that because of the pace of change, ASU probably has a winning strategy. Everybody else is gonna be like irrelevant very soon. So thanks for exposing us to that, I guess.
Yeah, no, wonderful. The role of play and experimentation. Wonderful. Partha, you had your hands raised, but then you put it down. Did you want to share anything?
No, sounds good. Yeah, thank you. So I think I was looking more for more use cases, particularly maybe in my interest in my area of work, which is market research and program assessment, new program ideas that I live and breathe in. So in the conference, I was picking brain of you folks, Conference Board of Canada. If there are use cases that where you are using AI to kind of speed or fasten some of those results and help our stakeholders to make decisions. So yeah, I'm totally open to kind of hear more about those use cases, cross-share some of those learnings. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, so we're rounding off the session, but I want two things for everyone. First, I will put right now a link in the chat for just a quick post roundtable survey. We do these at the end of every event to see what was of use today, but also how we could make those more useful. So we'll share that right now. If you can take literally 30 seconds to fill it up. But I want to conclude on the note that you just said, Partha, about what's next. And again, without going into committing anything, because we're still in early discussions, I want to invite everyone to stay tuned, because we did hear that there's a desire for more collaboration, for more practical use cases, and for more kind of national guidance. So we're working on this. And in addition to what we're already doing, you should see some more stuff coming in the next years. So thank you so much, everyone, for this amazing chat. I hope everyone found it as insightful as I did taking all the notes. We'll follow up with you with the exec summary. And I'm staying on if anyone else wants to stay to continue those chats. I'm not kicking anyone out. So, but thank you, everyone, and wishing you a great rest of your day and week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Merci,
Thanks,
Sandrine.
everybody.
Au revoir.
Merci.